The door was the most dangerous place in ancient Rome. Beyond the grand marble facades of the wealthy, the city's streets were a chaotic torrent of noise, commerce, and constant threat. And standing squarely in that breach every single day was a figure we have largely forgotten, the Roman doorman. By the end of this, you will understand the immense, hidden world of responsibility that rested on the shoulders of the ostiarius. How did a single slave decide who entered a powerful man's home? What terrifying risks did he face simply for doing his job? We are about to walk a day in his sandals, from the first light of dawn to the deepest, most vulnerable hours of the night. What do you think was the most important tool a Roman doorman possessed? His title was ostiarius, a word that meant far more than just doorman. In the rigid social world of Rome, he occupied a unique and critical position. He was almost always a slave, but not just any slave. The ostiarius was typically an older man, someone who had proven his loyalty over many years, or perhaps even a freedman who had chosen to remain in service to his former master. This was not a job for a young, inexperienced boy. It required judgment, a steady nerve, and an intimate knowledge of the family's affairs, its allies, and its enemies. His station was one of immense trust. Every person who approached that heavy door, from a senator to a street vendor, had to pass through his sole judgment. He was the gatekeeper, the first line of defense for the entire household, and the very first impression of the family's power and dignity. You would recognize him immediately. He was often chained to his post, not as a punishment, but as a grim necessity. A doorman who could abandon his duty during an attack or a fire was useless. So he stood, sometimes for hours on end, by the ostium, the grand entrance. He likely wore a simple, durable tunic, a symbol of his servitude, yet his bearing had to command a certain respect. This was the man, anchored to the threshold, upon whom the safety of every soul inside depended. And as the sun rose over the 7 hills, his long, demanding day truly began. His first duty was one of quiet, solitary preparation. Long before the master or his family stirred, the doorman would emerge into the cool, gray light of dawn. His tools were simple: a broom, a bucket of water, and a cloth, but his task was profound. He would meticulously sweep the doorstep, then wash it, often extending his efforts to the public street directly in front of the house. This was not mere housekeeping, it was a public declaration. A clean, well-maintained threshold or limen broadcast the family's discipline, wealth, and respectability to every neighbor and passerby. In the Roman mind, the threshold was a sacred boundary, a magical line separating the ordered, private world of the domus from the unpredictable chaos of the outside. By purifying this space each morning, the doorman performed a ritual that reinforced that vital separation, literally washing away the spiritual pollution of the previous night. Only after this symbolic cleansing would he turn to the physical fortifications. He would inspect the massive wooden door, testing its iron hinges. He would check the heavy wooden bar that slid into the wall, the metal bolts, and the complex locks, often secured with a key that only he and the master possessed. Every mechanism had to be sound, every point of potential weakness confirmed. In these silent morning hours, the doorman wasn't just cleaning and checking, he was actively rebuilding the barrier between safety and danger, between private life and public scrutiny. His work transformed the house from a vulnerable, sleeping entity into a prepared and imposing fortress, all before the first member of the household had even asked for their morning wine. The quiet of the morning never lasted. As the sun climbed higher, the street outside would begin to hum with a very specific kind of energy. This was the hour of the salutatio, the daily morning greeting, and it was the doorman's first major test of the day. A crowd would gather at the threshold, a jostling mix of men from all walks of life, the clients of the household's master, their patron. They were there to pay their respects, seek favors, or simply be seen, and it was the ostiarius who held absolute control over this human tide. His job transformed from custodian to conductor of a delicate, often tense social orchestra. He had to instantly recognize faces, knowing which client held high status and must be admitted immediately, and which could be made to wait. He was the filter, keeping out the outright beggars, the overly aggressive petitioners, or anyone who might cause a scene and embarrass the patron inside. Managing the order of entry was a high-stakes puzzle. One wrong move could insult a powerful ally, and woven through all of this was the ever-present whisper of the sportula, a small gift or bribe. A client hoping for preferential treatment might discreetly press a coin into the doorman's hand. To accept it was risky, a betrayal of the master's trust if discovered. But to refuse it could anger a client who might then complain to the patron. The doorman stood at this crossroads of power and protocol every single morning, his every decision a balancing act between upholding his master's dignified reputation and navigating the murky, self-interested currents of Roman social life. One misjudgment could see him beaten or worse, but the salutatio was merely the scheduled chaos. Once the last client had shuffled away, the doorman's true test of endurance began, a relentless, unbroken vigil that stretched until nightfall. His eyes had to remain fixed on the street, a living surveillance system scanning for threats that wore no official badge. Common thieves, known as grasssetters, would case wealthy homes, looking for a moment of distraction. Political rivals might send agents to loiter, gathering information, or waiting for an opportunity to deliver an insult or a threat. Even a spontaneous street argument could swell into an unruly mob that might decide to pound on the door. Against all of this, the ostiarius was the sole, static defender. His primary weapon was rarely a sword that was for soldiers. It was a stout, heavy club called a fustes, a brutal tool for close quarters defense. And beside him, often chained as well, might be a large guard dog, a silent partner whose growl was an early warning system no human could provide. Every person approaching now required a different kind of scrutiny. A delivery of wine or grain had to be inspected. The carriers questioned. Was this the expected merchant? Were their faces familiar? A messenger claiming to be from a senator required verification. A password or a sealed letter the doorman knew to look for. He was trained to read body language, the shift of eyes, the nervous hand, the overly casual posture of someone trying too hard not to be noticed. This constant, draining focus was the core of his duty. To be caught sleeping at his post was not a simple mistake. It was a catastrophic failure of trust that could result in severe punishment, even death. The doorway was a vulnerable artery, and he was the clot that stopped any danger from getting in. Yet his duties extended far beyond the physical barrier of the door. The ostiarius was the household's central nervous system, its primary communication hub. Every piece of information entering or leaving the home passed through him. A runner would arrive breathless, clutching a wax tablet or a sealed scroll. A servant from another house would approach with a whispered oral message. Before any of it reached the master's ears, it was intercepted and screened by the doorman. He had to judge the messenger's credibility on the spot. Was the seal on the letter authentic? did the servant's story hold together. He was the first filter for truth and falsehood, for urgent news and trivial gossip. Once a message was deemed legitimate, his role shifted to announcer. He would not simply wave a visitor through. For any guest of note, he would turn toward the interior of the house and call out in a clear, formal voice. He announced the visitor's name, their father's name, and sometimes their hometown, a full social identification. More importantly, he declared their purpose. Gaius Valerius, son of Marcus, requests an audience regarding the grain shipment. This ritual served a vital function. It allowed the master, hearing the announcement from his study or receiving room, a few precious moments to compose himself, to recall who this person was and what they might want. It turned a potentially awkward surprise into a managed social interaction. To perform this flawlessly, the doorman carried a living database in his head. He memorized a vast, intricate network of names, faces, family connections, and political alliances. He knew which senator was currently feuding with his master, which merchant was reliable, which client was always asking for too much. He was the family's social memory and its earliest warning system. A familiar face appearing with an unfamiliar nervousness, or a minor official suddenly arriving unannounced. These were subtle signals he was trained to detect and interpret. In a world without digital contacts or instant messaging, the doorman's mind was the most valuable directory and threat assessment tool the household possessed. But his role extended far beyond security and announcements. The doorman was also a financial gatekeeper, a duty that placed him directly in the path of simmering resentment. In many wealthy households, the master owned not just his grand home, but also the crowded, multi-story apartment blocks known as insulae. And when the first of the month arrived, it was the ostiarius who became the rent collector. Imagine the scene. A line of tired, anxious tenants forms at the very same doorstep where senators had been greeted hours before. Each must hand over their hard-earned coins to the slave chained to the door. The interaction was inherently tense. For the tenant, this man represented an uncaring landlord, a barrier to keeping a roof over their family's head. For the doorman, it was a test of firmness and diplomacy. He had to be immovable on the amount, yet tactful enough to avoid provoking a violent outburst. A tenant pleading for an extension, a mother explaining a sick child's medical costs, a craftsman whose workshop had burned down. He heard every desperate story, but his loyalty was to his master's purse. To show undue sympathy was a failure. To incite a riot at the door was a catastrophe. This duty made him a lightning rod for the frustrations of the entire neighborhood, a visible symbol of economic inequality. His other financial task was the reverse. Later in the day, he might be tasked with distributing his patron's charity, the sportula, to the waiting crowd of clients. Now he held a basket of small food baskets or coins, and the dynamic flipped. He had to ensure the right amount went to the right person according to their rank, navigating a sea of outstretched hands and hopeful, sometimes demanding faces. A misstep here, a perceived slight. A handout given to the wrong person could damage his master's political reputation just as surely as a missed rent payment hurt his finances. In these moments, the doorman wasn't just guarding a physical threshold. He was managing the volatile boundary between wealth and need, between obligation and anger, with nothing but his own judgment to guide him. And beneath every physical threat lay a deeper, more corrosive danger, the relentless psychological warfare waged against the man at the door. His authority was a thin shield against a torrent of scorn. Every person he turned away, every debtor he pressed for payment, Every political rival's agent he blocked carried away a seed of resentment, and they often planted it right back at him in the form of vicious insults. He was called every name imaginable: a mindless brute, a chained dog, a lowly piece of furniture. These weren't just casual slurs, they were calculated attacks meant to undermine his dignity and, by extension, the dignity of the household he represented. An angry client denied entry might spit at his feet. A political enemy's messenger refused passage, could deliver a thinly veiled threat against the doorman's own life, knowing he was a fixed, vulnerable target. The psychological skill required here was immense, a kind of emotional armor. He had to stand perfectly still, face impassive, absorbing this hatred without a flicker of reaction. Why? Because any retaliation, any loss of temper, would instantly become a scandal. If a doorman struck a citizen, even in self-defense, it could be spun as the master's household running wild, a sign of barbaric disorder. The slave's mistake became the patron's political liability, so he endured day after day, swallowing his pride and his fear. This created a constant, low-grade stress that never truly lifted. He held real authority over who entered and who paid what, yet he himself was afforded zero personal respect. He was a paradox, a powerful non-person. The very chain that symbolized his unwavering duty also marked him as property, an object to be insulted with impunity. His stoicism wasn't just a personal virtue, it was a professional necessity, a silent performance of control under fire that protected the entire delicate social fiction of his master's honorable home. The mental strain was anchored in a body pushed to its absolute limits. Forget the image of a relaxed porter, this was a test of sheer physical endurance. The ostiarius stood for hours that bled into days, his post often a semi-exposed niche offering little shelter from the elements. The Mediterranean sun beat down, turning his station into an oven. Winter rains soaked his tunic with a chill that seeped into his bones. He stood through it all, a fixed point in the swirling chaos of the street, with no option to simply step inside for a break. His physical strength was not for show, it was a daily requirement. The main door of a wealthy domus was a massive construction of thick wood, reinforced with iron bands. Opening and closing it for authorized visitors was a significant effort, a full-body task of pushing against its immense weight. But strength truly mattered when the door needed to stay shut. Restraining a single determined, unwanted entrant required brute force. Managing a small crowd or a drunken mob surging against the threshold demanded the strength of a laborer and the leverage of a soldier. This constant readiness, this need to be a human barricade at a moment's notice, wore on the body like a grinding stone. And when did he rest? True, uninterrupted sleep was a luxury he could not afford. For 24-hour coverage, doormen worked in shifts. The night watchman might catch a few hours of fitful sleep on a thin pallet or a pile of straw laid directly on the stone floor near the door, his ears still tuned to the sounds of the sleeping city. This cycle, the unrelenting standing, the exposure, the bursts of demanding physical exertion, all compounded by poor rest, led to a state of chronic fatigue. His knees and back ached with a deep, persistent pain. His feet swelled, yet he could never show this weakness, for his very posture was part of the household's defense, a display of unwavering vigilance. The doorman's body was not his own. It was a tool worn down in service, a testament to the brutal, unending physical price of guarding the threshold. The weight of his duties stretched far beyond security into the very atmosphere of the entrance. As dusk settled over Rome, The doorman's role shifted from guardian to provider of light and warmth, tasks that were anything but trivial. His hands, calloused from gripping his club, now carefully tended to the oil lamps or torches mounted beside the grand door. This was a critical nightly ritual. A well-lit threshold was a powerful statement in a city where darkness was absolute and dangerous. It served as a beacon for legitimate visitors, guiding late-arriving clients or returning family members safely home. More importantly, it banished the shadows where thieves or malicious loiterers could hide. By casting a steady, golden glow across the doorstep and the street immediately before it, the doorman was actively pushing back the perimeter of safety, creating a circle of visibility that was an extension of his own watchful gaze. The quality of this light spoke volumes. Flickering, poorly maintained torches suggested a household in decline, perhaps one that could not afford good oil or attentive slaves. A bright, unwavering flame, however, projected control, prosperity, and unwavering vigilance. In the depth of winter, his duties expanded to include managing the braziers. These metal bowls, filled with glowing charcoal, would be placed strategically near the entrance, not for the doorman's comfort, though he surely appreciated it, but for the comfort of those who mattered. When an important guest arrived on a cold evening, stepping from the frigid street into the warmth radiating from the doorway was an immediate, unspoken gesture of respect and hospitality. It said, "You are expected, and your comfort is our concern." Conversely, on a day when the master wished to discourage visitors, a cold, dark entrance, devoid of both light and welcoming heat, sent a message as clear as any spoken refusal. Through these simple, elemental acts, the doorman controlled the ambience of the threshold, modulating it from intimidating to inviting with the lighting of a flame or the stoking of coals. He wasn't just guarding a door, he was meticulously crafting the first sensory experience of the home itself. Yet the doorman's authority did not stop at the outer door. His chain tethered him to the threshold, but his influence reached deep into the heart of the household itself, into the private world of the other slaves. In the rigid hierarchy of the domus, the ostiarius was a senior enforcer, a lieutenant responsible for maintaining domestic order. One of his most critical internal duties was controlling the movement of the household staff. A cook could not simply slip out to the market, nor could a maid visit a relative without the master's explicit permission. That permission, however, was enforced by the man at the door. He was the final checkpoint. Any slave attempting to leave would have to pass his scrutiny, providing a valid reason and often a token or password that proved they were on approved business. To him, every face leaving was a potential runaway, every errand a possible cover for theft or conspiracy. This made him the ultimate gatekeeper not just for the outside world, but for the enslaved community within, their sole barrier to even a moment of fleeting freedom beyond the walls. This role naturally bled into one of surveillance and discipline. The doorman's ears were always open. As lower-ranking slaves passed by his station, delivering messages or fetching items, he overheard their whispered conversations, their complaints about the steward, their quiet grievances. He was strategically positioned to catch fragments of gossip, plots to steal food, or plans for unauthorized meetings, and he was expected to report any sign of misconduct or discontent directly to the master or the head steward. In this, he became the master's eyes and ears within the slave quarters, a trusted informant. This created a profoundly complex and tense dynamic. To the master, he was a pillar of loyalty. But to the other slaves, he was often a figure of fear and deep resentment, a spy in their midst. They could never be sure if a casual remark made near the entrance would find its way upstairs, leading to a beating or a reduction in rations. His very presence fostered a climate of silent suspicion. Was he a fellow victim of the system, simply trying to survive and avoid punishment himself by being ruthlessly diligent? Or was he a willing participant, leveraging his position of trust for slightly better food or the fragile illusion of security? He lived in a terrible limbo, trapped between two worlds. He shared the burdens of servitude with the staff, yet he wielded a sliver of punitive power over them. He was one of them, and yet he was not. This internal policing duty may have been one of the most psychologically isolating aspects of his entire existence, turning the home into a place where he was both guard and guarded. Never fully belonging to either side of the door he spent his life defending. But this immense burden he carried was not invisible. It was a spectacle. The doorman himself was a living, breathing advertisement for the power of the man who owned him. In a society obsessed with public image, the quality of your ostiarius was a direct, unsubtle measure of your social standing. For a modest tradesman living in a comfortable but unremarkable domus, the doorman might be a single, older slave, perhaps doubling as a general handyman. He was functional, a necessary piece of the household's machinery. But for a senator or a fabulously wealthy merchant, the doorman was a centerpiece. He was chosen for his imposing physique, tall and broad-shouldered, a visual deterrent before he ever spoke a word. His tunic, while still marking him as a slave, might be of finer, cleaner wool. His posture was drilled into him, a statue of alertness that never slouched. This man was not just security, he was a statement carved from flesh and bone, proclaiming to every passerby that within these walls resided a person of such importance that he could afford to dedicate a prime specimen of human labor solely to the task of guarding an entryway. The statement grew exponentially with the scale of the residence. In a truly palatial villa or an imperial palace, the single doorman multiplied into a small, specialized corps. You would not find one man chained to a door, but a hierarchy of porters and guards. A junior porter might handle the initial screening of visitors at an outer gate. A more senior, dignified ostiarius would stand at the grand main entrance. His role focused on ceremony and the announcement of elite guests. Behind him, within the labyrinthine halls, other specialized porters, called initers, guarded the thresholds to private apartments, libraries, and treasuries. Each was a cog in a vast security and hospitality machine, each uniformed and drilled to perfection. The emperor's doormen were legendary, often chosen from loyal foreign bodyguards, towering and silent, their very presence designed to awe and intimidate. To be greeted, or more accurately, scrutinized by such a man was to feel the weight of imperial power before you even laid eyes on the throne. This was the ultimate irony of the doorman's existence. He was a slave, property with no legal personhood, yet his appearance and conduct were meticulously curated to broadcast his master's supreme personhood to the world. A shabby, inattentive doorman implied a shabby, weak master. A sharp, formidable doorman implied a household of discipline, wealth, and latent force. The doorman was the human face of the household's social currency, his body, and bearing the first and most public investment in the family's reputation. Every time he turned away an unwanted guest with firm grace, or announced a senator with resonant clarity, he wasn't just doing his job, he was performing his master's status for an audience of the entire city. His silent vigil was, in itself, a continuous, powerful speech. This loyalty was tested not by protocol, but by violence. The doorman's chain made him a fixed target for any rage directed at his master. During the city's frequent political riots, a rival factions mob would not march on the Senate first. They would descend upon the homes of their enemies. And the first person they encountered was the ostiarius, standing alone before the door. He was the human obstacle to their fury. Historical accounts are filled with references to porters being beaten, stoned, or even killed while defending their posts. In a culture of personal vendettas, harming a rival's trusted doorman was a deliberate insult, a way to strike at the master's pride and demonstrate his vulnerability. Common burglars, too, knew that to get to the household's wealth, they had to get past the man with the club. A nighttime assault on a wealthy home was a brutal, close-quarters affair, and the doorman was the first and often only line of defense. If he failed, the entire household was at the mercy of the intruders. The legal reality, however, made his sacrifice even more grim. As a slave, the doorman was legally property. If a citizen injured or killed him during an attack, the perpetrator wasn't charged with murder. The crime was property damage. The master could sue for the financial value of the lost slave, as one might sue for a stolen horse or a shattered statue. There were no social repercussions for the attacker, no outcry for justice for the fallen man. His death was a financial transaction, a line item in a ledger. This legal invisibility amplified the danger. An angry client, a political enemy, or a common thief knew they could assault the doorman with relative impunity. The real risk wasn't punishment from the state, but potential retaliation from the powerful man who owned him. So the doorman faced every threat, understanding a terrible truth. His life was expendable, his bravery was legally meaningless, and his only hope for any justice lay in the loyalty he showed, a loyalty that demanded he stand his ground against overwhelming odds, where every shift of the crowd outside could be his last. Yet this solitary figure was never truly alone. His chain tethered him to the doorstep, but his world extended in a constant, buzzing radius into the street itself. The ostiarius was a neighborhood fixture, as much a part of the local landscape as the cobblestones or the public fountain down the lane. His day was punctuated by a rotating cast of characters from the vibrant, chaotic public sphere. The scent of fresh bread would announce the baker's slave making his morning rounds, and a quick, familiar exchange might secure a loaf for the household kitchen. The water seller, with his amphora and cup, would pause, offering a drink for a small coin, a transaction the doorman might facilitate for a messenger in a hurry. He knew the regular beggars by sight, the war veteran with one leg, the old woman with the persistent cough, and he had to decide, moment by moment, whether to shoo them away or, on his master's unspoken policy, occasionally toss a crust from the household stores into their outstretched hands. This constant, low-level interaction made him a unique node of information. Street vendors gossiped about which shops had new stock from Ostia. Loitering youths might let slip about a brawl planned near the tavern after dark. A traveler, dusty and disoriented, would approach asking for directions to the house of Lucius on the Aventine Hill, and the doorman, with his encyclopedic knowledge of the district, would become a momentary guide, pointing the way with his club. In these small exchanges, he wasn't just a barrier, he was a conduit. He absorbed the rumors, the complaints about rising grain prices, the news of a fire in the Subura district, the talk of a popular gladiators' upcoming match. This intelligence was invaluable. When his master later asked about the mood in the streets or the truth behind a circulating rumor, the doorman could provide an answer grounded not in aristocratic hearsay, but in the raw, unfiltered chatter of the city. His post was a listening station, and his loyalty determined whether that river of public talk flowed into the house as useful insight or was dammed up and ignored. He stood precisely at the intersection of two Romes, the private, ordered world of the domus behind him, and the teeming, unpredictable life of the res publica before him, filtering the chaos of one into the security of the other with every glance and every brief, calculated conversation. This constant presence at the threshold gave the doorman a unique legal authority. His word, under oath, carried surprising weight in a Roman courtroom, because he was the fixed, unchanging witness to every arrival and departure. His testimony could settle disputes that happened far beyond his line of sight. In a society built on personal honor and verbal contracts, his daily observations became a kind of living evidence. If a neighbor sued the master, claiming a debt had been repaid on a specific Tuesday, the doorman would be summoned. He would be asked, did the plaintiff enter the house that day? Did he carry a money pouch? Was he alone? The doorman's memory of that mundane morning could decide the case. In matters of adultery, a particularly serious charge, his testimony was even more critical. A husband suspecting his wife might call on the doorman of the alleged lover's house. The question was brutally simple. Did my wife cross this threshold? The doorman's answer, yes or no, could shatter families and reputations. For inheritance disputes, where the validity of a final will or a deathbed visitor was contested, the doorman who guarded the dying man's room was the last independent witness to who went in and out in the final hours. His memory was a legal record. To manage this immense responsibility, many doormans kept a simple mental log, or even a rudimentary physical one if they were literate. A tally of significant visitors, a note of a merchant's delivery time, the memory of a sealed document being handed to a specific messenger. This was not official record keeping, but a personal system to protect himself and his master. The pressure to be accurate was immense. Lying under oath to protect his master was a terrible risk, punishable by law. Telling an inconvenient truth that harmed his master's case could lead to private, brutal punishment. He had to navigate a narrow path between legal honesty and household loyalty, knowing his every working hour was potentially a prelude to testimony. The silent man at the door was, in the eyes of the law, the household's most reliable chronicler, his life a continuous, unwritten affidavit. Even the simple act of eating was a logistical challenge for the man chained to the door. The household kitchen, bustling in the interior courtyard, prepared meals for the entire familia, the extended family of both relatives and slaves. The doorman's share would be brought out to him, a bowl of pulse, the thick porridge of spelt or emmer wheat that was the caloric backbone of the Roman diet, perhaps with some lentils, a bit of cheese, or a piece of salted fish if the household was doing well. He would not join the other slaves for a leisurely meal in the kitchen or a shaded corner of the peristyle. His dinner was taken standing up or perched on a small stool right there at his post, consumed quickly between screening visitors. Every bite was interrupted by a knock, a shouted question from the street, or the approach of a stranger needing assessment. His nourishment was functional, fuel consumed under the pressure of constant vigilance. In terms of quantity and quality, his rations were likely better than those of the lowest field hands or miners, whose diets were designed for bare survival, but far plainer than the meat, fresh vegetables, and fine wines enjoyed by the master's family in the triclinium. His status as a trusted senior slave placed him in a middle tier, his food a reflection of his value as a piece of critical household infrastructure, not as a person to be indulged. Yet this system had a small, unofficial loophole that provided one of his few tangible perks. Visitors, especially clients hoping for a smoother entry or merchants eager for the household's business, might bring a small offering. A basket of early figs, a clay jar of olives, a few honey cakes. These were not bribes of coin, which were too direct and dangerous, but gifts of food, socially acceptable tokens of goodwill. For the doorman, these items were a vital supplement. They broke the monotony of his daily porridge, offering a taste of sweetness or variety he would otherwise never receive. A piece of fruit, a handful of nuts, these were luxuries. Accepting them was a delicate dance, a minor corruption that was widely tolerated because it cost the master nothing and kept his gatekeeper content. That small jar of olives represented more than a snack. It was a shred of agency, a tiny reward extracted from the very social machinery he was paid to operate. It meant that while his body was anchored to the threshold, his sustenance sometimes came from the human traffic that flowed past it, a quiet economy of favor and food conducted in the shadow of the door. His physical and social duties were anchored by a deeper, sacred responsibility. Just inside the entrance, often in a niche in the atrium wall or directly beside the door itself, stood the lararium, the small shrine to the household gods. This was the spiritual heart of the home, and its proximity to the threshold was no accident. The lairs, protective spirits of the ancestors and the land, watched over the family's fortunes and, most importantly, guarded the boundary between the safe interior and the chaotic outside. As the guardian of that physical boundary, the doorman naturally became the shrine's custodian. Each morning, after sweeping the step and checking the locks, one of his first quiet tasks would be to tend to this sacred space. He would ensure the small statues of the lairs were clean and properly arranged. His hands, which later gripped a club, would carefully refill the shrine's tiny oil lamp, ensuring its flame never died out. This eternal flame was a symbol of the family's ongoing life and divine protection, and its flickering light in the dim entrance hall was a constant, reassuring presence. In some households, he might even be entrusted with making small, daily offerings on behalf of the family, a few grains of incense, a drop of wine, or a bit of honey cake placed before the figures. This ritual was not a casual chore. It was a vital reinforcement of the home's spiritual defenses. By maintaining the shrine, the doorman was actively participating in the divine contract that kept the household safe. His practical vigilance at the door was mirrored by his ritual vigilance at the altar. Every time he turned away a threatening stranger, he wasn't just exercising judgment. He was enforcing a sacred boundary blessed by the gods. If a particularly ominous event occurred, a bad omen witnessed at the door, or a threat spoken against the master, the doorman might be the one to report it, triggering more elaborate purification rites to cleanse the violated threshold. His role fused the mundane and the metaphysical, making him not just a watchman, but a priest of the porch, his daily routines a continuous prayer for protection woven into the very fabric of his duty. The chain that bound him to the post now takes on another layer of meaning. It anchored him at the crossroads of the physical and spiritual worlds, where every decision carried weight in both. The final act of the doorman's day was a solemn, methodical ritual of closure. As the last amber light faded from the western sky, his duties shifted from managing traffic to enacting a complete and total lockdown. This was not a simple matter of closing a door. Every entrance to the sprawling domus had to be secured, a circuit that included the grand main door, the smaller postern gate for servants, the heavy shutters on street-facing windows, and the gates to any interior courtyards or gardens accessible from the outside. Accompanied by another trusted slave, often the night watchman who would relieve him, the doorman would make his final rounds. Each massive wooden door was pushed shut with a deep, resonant thud that echoed through the quieting house. He would slide the thick wooden bar into its stone brackets, a sound of finality like a bolt being thrown on a treasure chest. Then came the metallic clunk of iron bolts being driven home, and finally the scrape and click of the lock, its key turned with a definitive motion. He was systematically severing the household's connection to the outside world, transforming it from an open hub of social activity into an impregnable vault. His last external task was to douse the oil lamps and torches he had lit hours before. One by one, the circles of warm, welcoming light that had pushed back the darkness were extinguished, plunging the threshold and the street before it into deep shadow. This was a powerful, silent signal to the entire neighborhood. The house was now closed, its business concluded, its hospitality withdrawn. Any further knocking was not just an inconvenience, it was a potential threat. The transition from day to night was complete, marked not by the setting sun, but by the actions of the man at the door. With the domain secured, the atmosphere transformed. The night shift began, a watch defined by a profound and eerie silence broken only by distant, unsettling sounds. The raucous daytime clamor of carts, hawkers, and crowds melted away, replaced by the occasional bark of a dog, the faint echo of footsteps from a late-night traveler hurrying home, or the drunken song of a reveler stumbling from a tavern. This silence was not peaceful. It was tense and pregnant with possibility. Darkness in ancient Rome was absolute, a thick blanket that hid both the innocent and the malicious. For the night watchman now stationed at the door, every rustle in the alley, every creak of a nearby shutter, demanded interpretation. Was it a cat knocking over a pot, or a burglar testing the latch on a neighbor's window? The risks escalated dramatically after dark. This was the preferred hour for the most serious crimes. The gladiators who were mere pickpockets by day could become violent home invaders by night. Gangs might roam, looking for easy targets. The political thugs who shouted insults by daylight could now carry out actual assaults under the cover of darkness. The night watchman's alertness had to be hyper-focused, his hearing acute, his vision straining to pick out shapes in the inky blackness. He often worked in utter solitude, a lone sentinel in a sea of shadows, responsible for the safety of dozens of sleeping souls inside. His only companions were the chill night air, the steady glow of the single lamp left burning at the lararium shrine behind him, and the weight of his fusties in his hand. This was the doorman's duty at its most raw and vulnerable, a test of nerve against the unknown, where the chain that bound him to his post felt less like a symbol of duty and more like a tether to a post of immense, silent dread. The true test of a doorman's skill arrived not with a threat, but with an invitation. On the nights his master hosted a grand cena, a formal dinner party, the familiar rhythm of the threshold shattered into controlled pandemonium. The solitary vigil transformed into managing a swirling, noisy spectacle. From late afternoon onward, a procession would begin. First came the extra servants hired for the evening, carrying rented couches, stacks of fine dishes, and amphorae of expensive wine, all requiring inspection and direction to the kitchens. Then arrived the musicians with their lyres and flutes, the dancers, and perhaps even a poet or a philosopher hired to provide entertainment, each group adding to the din building behind the door. The doorman's primary duty now was not exclusion, but orchestrated inclusion. He held the guest list in his mind, a mental catalog of every senator, knight, and wealthy client expected. As litters began to clog the narrow street and torchbearers illuminated the faces of the elite, his judgment had to be flawless and instantaneous. Recognizing a prestigious guest, he would announce their arrival with special ceremony, his voice cutting through the interior clamor to ensure they were received with the honor they demanded. Yet this visible influx attracted a shadow crowd. The merely curious, hopeful freeloaders and even professional party crashers would gather, trying to slip in amidst the legitimate guests. The doorman became a human filter at maximum pressure, his eyes darting between the arriving nobility and the opportunistic faces at the edge of the torchlight. A single mistake, allowing an uninvited and embarrassing guest to enter, could ruin the entire evening's carefully crafted social politics. The noise was relentless, a blend of street chaos, musical warm-ups, and the rising chatter of dozens of guests already inside. Amidst this, he might also have to manage discreet deliveries of last-minute delicacies or handle urgent messages for the host, all while maintaining the dignified facade of the household. A festival day was even more overwhelming as the entire city spilled into the streets. The private threshold became a fortress against a tide of public revelry. His club was not just for thieves now, but for keeping back drunk celebrants who might stumble against the door or vomit on the freshly washed step. On these high-stakes nights, the doorman's value was measured in social grace as much as brute force. He was the conductor of his master's reputation, ensuring that only the right notes of laughter and conversation passed through his door, while the dissonance of the outside world was held firmly at bay. The relentless duty of the ostiarius, however, was not always a life sentence. For some, the chain was not permanent, and the very loyalty forged at the threshold could become the key to unlocking it. This was the powerful, shimmering hope of manumission, the formal grant of freedom from a grateful master. A doorman who served faithfully for decades, who had defended the household with his body and its secrets with his silence, stood a real chance of being rewarded. In the eyes of a Roman patron, freeing such a slave was not just an act of kindness, it was a smart investment. It transformed a piece of property into a lifelong client, a freedman now legally bound by social obligation and deep personal gratitude to continue serving the family's interests. The ceremony itself could be deeply symbolic. A master might pronounce the words of freedom during a lavish dinner party, with all his important guests as witnesses, turning the slave's liberation into a public display of the patron's generosity and power. Or it might happen more privately, through a declaration before a magistrate, or even as a clause in the master's will, granting freedom upon his death. For the doorman, hearing those words was a moment of profound transformation. The chain was struck off, not just from the doorpost, but from his entire legal existence. He was no longer an ostiarius, a thing. He was a libertus, a freedman, with a new Roman name often derived from his former masters, marking his origin and his eternal social connection. But what came next? Freedom did not mean wealth or leisure. A freedman had to build a life from scratch, and his unique skills became his greatest asset. Many chose to stay within the orbit of their patron's household, trading the duty of guarding the door for the responsibility of managing the door's profits. A common path was to become an insularius, a property manager for the very apartment blocks whose tenants he once collected rent from, who better to handle difficult renters, oversee repairs, and ensure a steady income than the man who already knew every face and every excuse on the street. This was a position of significant trust and could be quite lucrative. Other freed doormen, leveraging the connections and favors they had witnessed for years, might set up small businesses. With a loan from their patron, they could open a tavern, a small workshop, or a lending stall in the market. Their intimate knowledge of the neighborhood's rhythms and needs gave them a real advantage. They had seen what goods sold quickly, which services were lacking, and how to navigate the local networks of suppliers and officials. This hope of freedom, this tangible possibility of a life beyond the threshold, was the engine that powered decades of unwavering service. It turned the grueling vigilance, the swallowed insults, and the lonely nights into a kind of grim investment. Every time he barred the door against a threat, he wasn't just protecting his master's silver, he was protecting his own future. That dream of one day walking freely through that very door, not as a sentinel but as a citizen, made the weight of the chain bearable. It was the light at the end of the long, dark vigil. The silent, anonymous doorman steps out of the shadows when we look at the stories Romans told about themselves. In the surviving fragments of their literature, the ostiarius appears not as a hero, but as a perfectly drawn character, a mirror held up to the anxieties of the household. The most famous portrait comes from Petronius's riotous novel, The Satyricon, a satire of vulgar new money. At the outrageous dinner party of the freedman Trimalchio, the doorman is a spectacle of mismanaged wealth. He is described as dressed in green, wearing a cherry-colored belt, shelling peas into a silver bowl. This absurd image tells us everything. A proper doorman's duty is vigilance. His color should be discreet, his tool a club. This man is in fancy dress, distracted by a menial kitchen task, using precious metal for legumes. He is a symbol of Trimalchio's disorderly home, where all the traditional rules are flaunted. The doorman here is a joke, but the joke only works because every Roman reader knew exactly how a proper doorman should behave. His failure is a sign of his master's deep social failing. In the comedies of Plautus, doormen are often surly, obstructive figures, sources of frustration for lovers trying to sneak into a sweetheart's house, their stubbornness driving the plot's misunderstandings. These literary snapshots prove the doorman was a universal archetype, a familiar piece of the social furniture that writers could use to instantly convey a mood, whether it was oppressive security, laughable incompetence, or the simple, grinding reality of a barrier. History, too, offers glimpses of individuals who stood at the threshold before stepping onto a larger stage. While records rarely name a simple household ostiarius, we can infer the role's potential as a stepping stone. A young slave noted for his sharp mind and loyalty might begin his service at the door, where he could observe politics and power firsthand, before being promoted to a secretary or business agent for his master. More concretely, we know of powerful freedmen in the imperial court, men like Narcissus or Pallas under Emperor Claudius, who controlled access to the emperor himself. While not doormen in the literal sense, they performed the same essential function on a galactic scale, filtering the entire Roman world's pleas and threats before they reached the imperial ear. Their power was that of the ultimate ostiarius, and it was terrifying. There are also infamous incidents where the man at the door was the first casualty of history. During the proscriptions, the bloody political purges when powerful men like Sulla or the Second Triumvirate posted lists of enemies to be killed, the first target at any condemned man's house was inevitably his doorman. Murderous gangs would arrive in the night, and the loyal slave guarding the door would die fighting to give his master a few more moments to flee or to commit suicide with dignity. In these moments, the abstract duty became horrifically real. The doorman's body literally became the first line of defense, his death a statistic in a political purge, yet for the household inside, It was a sacrifice that echoed through generations. These stories, both fictional and historical, anchor our understanding. They transform the general description of duties into a human reality, showing us the doorman as a comic foil, a tragic victim, and a silent witness to the brutal machinery of Roman power, all from his fixed and vulnerable post by the door. But how do we move from these written stories to the tangible reality of the doorman's world? The silent testimony of archaeology provides the answer, grounding the literary drama in the worn stone and rusted iron of daily life. Excavations of Roman homes, from Pompeii's frozen streets to the foundations of Ostian apartment blocks, reveal a physical environment built for control. The most telling artifacts are the doors themselves, or what remains of them. We find massive, bronze-clad hinges that once swung panels of oak so thick they could withstand a battering ram. Embedded in the doorjambs are the stone sockets for heavy wooden bars, grooves worn smooth from 1,000 nights of being slid into place. The thresholds themselves tell a story of endless traffic. The stone slabs at the entrance are often deeply concave, hollowed out by centuries of footsteps passing over the same exact spot, a permanent record of the human river the Doorman managed. This erosion pattern is never uniform. It dips most sharply just inside the door, where visitors pause to be announced, their weight settling as they waited for judgment. The architecture of the entryway reinforces the doorman's strategic position. In grand houses, the fosses, or entry corridor, is narrow and tunnel-like, forcing visitors into a single file and delivering them directly under the watchman's gaze before they could spill into the open atrium. His post was a choke point, designed by the very bricks and mortar. Archaeology also reveals where he likely slept. Small, Spartan rooms or alcoves are frequently found just off the entrance, spaces with direct sightlines to the door. These cubicles held no frescoes or fine mosaics, just a space for a pallet and a place to store his club. Their location confirms his perpetual state of readiness. He lived at his workplace because his workplace required a 24-hour guard. Perhaps the most famous and direct artifact speaking to his duty is the mosaic. In several Pompeian entryways, visitors were greeted not by a slave, but by a vivid image on the floor, a ferocious dog, often with the words "Cave Canem," beware of the dog, spelled out in tiles. This was more than decoration. It was a psychological extension of the doorman himself. For the literate visitor, the written warning was a clear command. For everyone else, the snarling, chain-rending beast depicted in colorful stone sent an unmistakable message about the household's protective instincts. It was a permanent, unblinking deterrent, a doorman who never slept, never accepted a bribe, and never needed to be fed. These physical traces, the worn stone, the strategic architecture, the warning underfoot, they don't just corroborate the written records, they breathe life into them. They show us a society that engineered its very homes around the principle of controlled access, with the doorman as the living, breathing mechanism at the heart of the system. The world of the ancient doorman was not confined by the walls of Rome. From the bustling agora of Athens to the sun-baked courtyards of Memphis, the need to guard the threshold was a universal human concern. In ancient Greece, the equivalent figure was the theoros, a word that simply means doorkeeper. Like his Roman counterpart, the theoros was typically a slave, stationed to screen visitors and protect the household's privacy. We find him in Greek comedies, often portrayed as a grumbling, obstructive old man, a familiar stock character who provided laughs by frustrating lovers and delivery boys. In the grand palaces of Egypt and Persia, gatekeepers were part of a much larger, militarized security apparatus. They were less often individual slaves and more likely to be soldiers or members of a dedicated guard corps. Their function focused overwhelmingly on state security rather than the social filtering of a private home. The similarities are clear: a person of trusted but low status, positioned at a point of vulnerability, tasked with controlling passage. But what truly defined the Roman ostiarius, what made his daily reality so uniquely complex and stressful, was the specific social glue that held Roman society together: the patron-client system. This wasn't just a security job, it was a performance of social hierarchy in real time. Every morning during the salutatio, the doorman wasn't just checking for weapons. He was enacting a ritual that reinforced the entire pyramid of Roman power. He had to know which client's family had served his master for 3 generations, and which new man was trying to climb the ladder too quickly. The Greek theoros might keep out rude strangers, but the Roman doorman had to meticulously rank friends, allies, and rivals according to a dizzyingly intricate code of honor and obligation. The constant stream of gifts, the whispered requests for favorable placement in line, the political messages disguised as social calls, all of this traffic was the lifeblood of Roman politics and business, and it all flowed through his hands. In Persia, a guard might bow to a visiting satrap because of royal command. In Rome, the doorman announced a senator with precise ceremony because that senator's vote might be needed next week. His role was infused with a specifically Roman anxiety about status, reputation, and the volatile exchange of favors that could make or break a career. He stood at the physical bottleneck where the abstract world of social capital met the solid reality of a locked door, making him a uniquely Roman kind of guardian. That chain may have rusted away, but its shadow stretches across 12 years to fall on a figure you likely pass every day. The Roman doorman's ghost lives on in the modern concierge, the security guard, and the office receptionist. Their titles have changed, their uniforms are different, and thankfully, the chains are gone. Yet the core functions they perform at the threshold are startlingly unchanged. They are still gatekeepers, controlling who gains access to a private space, whether that space is a luxury apartment building, a corporate headquarters, or a hospital ward. They are still communication hubs, the first point of contact, the ones who announce visitors, manage deliveries, and filter information. Most profoundly, they remain living symbols, their appearance and demeanor a direct reflection of the power and prestige of the institution they represent. A stern, uniformed guard at a bank projects security and solemnity. A polished, helpful concierge at a 5-star hotel radiates exclusivity and service. A friendly, efficient receptionist in a tech startup conveys innovation and approachability. Just as the Roman patron curated his ostiarius to send a message, so too do modern businesses and residences carefully choose the face they present at their door. The social dynamics at play are timeless. Think of the subtle negotiation at a front desk. A visitor hoping to see a busy executive without an appointment employs a modern version of the sportula, not a coin, but perhaps a flattering comment, a name drop of a mutual acquaintance, or simply a performance of urgency and importance. The person at the desk must assess this in an instant, weighing protocol against potential offense, just as the ancient doorman weighed a client's status against his master's schedule. The resentment directed at the figure controlling access also echoes through time. The security guard enforcing rules, the receptionist denying entry, the apartment doorman turning away a delivery, they often absorb the frustration meant for the faceless bureaucracy or authority behind them. They stand in that same vulnerable, liminal space, caught between the rules of the interior and the demands of the outside world. This enduring reality makes the Roman doorman's daily grind suddenly, deeply relatable. His anxiety about making the right call, his need to project calm authority while under pressure, his role as both protector and servant. These are not ancient curiosities. They are the lived experience of millions of people who work at doorways today. When you next walk past a front desk or nod to a building guard, you are glimpsing the direct descendant of that chained slave on the cobblestone street. The materials have modernized, but the human drama at the threshold, the delicate dance of power, perception, and permission, remains one of history's most enduring performances. So the doorman's day was never just a single task, but a relentless, rotating shift of roles. He was the janitor at dawn, the social secretary at mid-morning, the armed guard by afternoon, the rent collector on the first of the month, and the night watchman in the terrifying dark. His body endured the elements. His mind cataloged a city's worth of faces and alliances, and his spirit absorbed a constant barrage of scorn. He stood at the precise point where the private world of the Roman family collided with the volatile public sphere, making split-second decisions that balanced security with politics, hospitality with suspicion, and loyalty with survival. He was not a mere servant by a door. He was the linchpin holding the entire delicate mechanism of the domus together. Without his unwavering vigilance, the wealth inside was vulnerable, the social order crumbled, and the sacred boundary of the home dissolved into the chaos of the street. His chain was a symbol of that absolute commitment, tethering him to a duty that was as psychologically complex as it was physically grueling. The story of the ostiarius reminds us that history is built not only by emperors and legions, but by the anonymous figures who held the line, day after day, at 1,000 unremarkable thresholds. Their silent vigils shaped the rhythm of daily life, enforced the rules of an entire society, and guarded the stories within. The next time you pass a doorway, think of the centuries of stories it has guarded. What do you think was the hardest part of the doorman's day? Share your thoughts below. If you found this journey into the hidden corners of ancient Rome fascinating, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more mysteries from the past.